Ladies and gentlemen, Kim here. Welcome to the daily update. Hope you guys had a good day trading today. Market is down. As you can see, S&P is down about 1.2%. I believe Nasdaq is down 0.7%. Dow about 1.4%. And the Russell is around, I think Dow 1.2%, Russell 1.4%. Banks about 1%. So pretty much across the board, we're down around 1.2%. Pretty much. We have two more trading sessions coming up here tomorrow and Friday. Let's try to figure out what we can expect going into end of this week here. So we've been talking about and tracking this gap. That gap, and I've been talking about how bulls needed to fill that gap or gap it over. We also talked about if that gap doesn't get filled, things could get hectic here. So what happened today, it looks like we slightly gapped up. That's the first hour, right? We've been staying above my short-term moving average here in the last couple days, and we did that on the first hour today of trading. Second hour also hung around there, and the third hour also hung around, but not able to fill this gap for a couple days after that gap has been open yesterday. And what happened was on the fourth hour, for the first time since, let's see here, this is the first time since about a week ago or so. You can see that this is where that short-term moving average acted as support. It used to act as resistance here. You see how that short-term moving average, even here, when that short-term moving average was lost, we saw bears coming in, and then we gapped up above my short-term moving average, and buyers did step in. We saw a little bit of fluctuation to the downside, pretty nice size, decent size gap down. But while the moving average, my short-term moving average was rising, we did see that dip buying activities occurred. And then we did put the price higher yesterday. And the problem was this gap was not filled entirety of it. And we've been tracking this gap this week. I've been tweeting things out that gap must be filled. So what happened was there's a gap resistance, right? The gap resistance and the short-term moving average support. And I think it was a battle of the two today. Right? And so I think if the buyers could have pushed higher and filled this gap, maybe then it could have avoided this down day today. What happened was we actually lost it here, and then the short-term moving average was lost, and that happened on the fourth hour. You see that red candle there on the fourth hour. So when we went to the fifth hour, we trying to stay up. We try to make similar candle here. You see that, right? We have the similar candlesticks, right? What is known as potentially some kind of a hammer bullish candle or dragonfly doji candles here, which has a bullish properties. Only problem is that when this hammer candle, right, or dragonfly doji came about, my short-term moving average was rising. When this hammer / dragonfly doji came about, the price was trading below my short-term moving average. You see the difference? Here, my moving average is rising, right? And price staying above my short-term moving average. We saw a move because there is that wind blowing to the upside, that momentum. But that momentum was waning here with some of these micro-term lower highs. And that happened on the fourth hour actually with this downturn. When that downturn happened, we lost that micro-term support and we lost the support of my short-term moving average here. So even though we saw that candlestick and bulls tried it, but things got heavy. My short-term moving average acting as resistance here on the last hour. Do you see that? There's a little wick there, and then it's flush to the downside. So let's zoom out a little bit So I think a lot of people are looking at this as support. I could also see that a lot of short-term traders going long, even chasing in this move, buying these dips, and they'll practically, a lot of times what they will do is they'll place their stop just beneath this level here. And so when the stops are getting taken out, people are getting out of their trades quickly on the last hour in fear. In these, a lot of short-term traders, and I think that's kind of what happened here, right? So that was important pivot that needed to hold, that didn't hold, and all of a sudden everybody is exiting. When I say everybody, I mean the short-term traders are exiting, right? Because I haven't closed out any of my longs today. Anyway, so let's zoom out here. So let's check out that kind of a shorter-term sense, and we'll go to midterm, right? This is a short-term short to mid-term rising pivot, right? And we talked about this yesterday, that if we see some kind of shenanigan or hectic movement going into this week, because this gap was never filled, that's a down gap, right? We're probably gonna come back down to where? To retest that rising pivot, which is coinciding with this gap. Remember, this gap was filled right away with this gap down yesterday. So now bears are going after this area, but this time around this gap is still open, and this time around we have a double support. So we got that rising pivot, right? And keep in mind, this rising pivot does have impressive resume. What I mean by that is, even though this thing came down pretty hard, when it came down to filling this gap and coinciding with that rising pivot, bulls did make a move, came back down again, and bulls made a move again, right? So this is important pivot that we're going to look at. We're going to track tomorrow and remainder of this week. Not only that, we have a gap area here, right? We're talking 355. This gap remains open. So we have this gap support at 355 and 353. And we have rising pivot. So we have double support that bears have to go through. I tell you what, best case scenario for the bears, because bears have to deal with this gap and the rising pivot. If bears want to see bears really want to do some damage in this market as quickly as possible, I think the best bet is gapping it down below the gap at 353 and below that rising pivot. Only problem is we do have my midterm moving average trying to protect that from happening. So even if we see a gap down, maybe that midterm moving average in this vicinity may act as support. And then we have another gap area at 349. So this is what's going to happen. If we see further decline tomorrow, 355, 353 will act as support, right? Bears are going to struggle in this vicinity. That's why it's best, they want to make things smooth and just really turbocharge this decline, bring it back down to 349, 350. It's best if they can gap it down below 353. If not, you will see buyers showing up at 355, 353. Also, we have that, midterm moving average guiding that level, protecting this level. So pretty much this vicinity right here is going to be served as pretty solid support area. Let's zoom out and look at the midterm and kind of look at the more of a midterm sense here. So in the midterm, we're still dealing with the bullish sentiment here. We are seeing some shenanigans here. We saw a big gap down or gap up. And then this thing came down, filled the gap. We saw a move, came down again, and then we gapped up and pulling back again. So we're seeing some volatilities, and these kind of things like to happen. Do you know why? Because most people missed out this move, and a lot of people start chasing up here. And when things get crowded, right? When things get crowded, when there's a lot of people, there's always some shenanigans always happen, right? And down here, they weren't crowded, so you see how the move is pretty smooth. And then a lot of people start jumping in and trying to chase it on 360s and 350s, and things get hectic here because we're already dealing with in that kind of an overbought sentiment here after this kind of move. right? Because the market already moved from the 320 here, and that was about 13% move in just about a week. And so it's no surprise that we see some kind of volatilities here. But the good news is that I think, we have that cultivation of higher highs here, right? In the midterm. So we want to continue to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers. I think as long as we stay above, man, I think as long as we stay above some of these levels, I think, 347, 349, I think some of these levels, I do believe that we're going to see some kind of bounce here. So let's see how he plays out. But let's check out that oscillator real quick. So that oscillator is interesting. We're back at this level. So there are a few things I can see here. So first of all, we are at support, right? Same thing kind of happened on this day when we saw that abrupt fade after a big gap up, right? This was after that announcement that Biden is going to be the projected winner. On Saturday, we saw that news. And then on Monday, when the market opened, we saw 3% gap up. But pretty much throughout the day, that gap got filled. And that's kind of what we saw, this thing rolling down. And this was where you can see that pullback made this thing go down here. And then initially did see a bounce, right? And then this thing made a move here. So we're back at this support. So what bears can do here is that if they need to push it lower and break this support, so that they want to bring the oscillator actually back down to the bottom of its band. Why? Because we do have buyers built this momentum. Because when the buyers can keep doing this and have this oscillator elevated, you're going to see buyers keep pushing it up, right? So right now, I think what bears need to do is break below this support and just end this, bullish momentum that they built. And what they need to do is bring this back down to the low and start, potentially oscillating back and forth at the bottom of its band, right? So we have this support on the oscillator, and we got that support on that price action, the rising pivot, and that's coinciding with that gap area at 355, right? So bears needs to push, but these gap areas, that rising pivot, it's gonna act as pretty strong support. Probably best bet for the bears is gapping it down below 355 and trying to push it even lower. If we see something like that, if we see a gap down and pushing it lower than 353, probably going to see this thing coming back down. That's what bears want to see. However, we see some kind of a fast reversal here. We start to see the price getting back up. And if I see the oscillator getting back up like this or something, start getting elevated, we could see sentiment shifting pretty quickly. Just remember how things looked here. Do you guys remember? Do you guys remember when this thing looked like that? When this thing was here, right? This thing came down, got up a little bit, and this pulled back. On this day, things looked pretty hectic, right? But you see how quickly that sentiment shifted when we found support here and here. And we're kind of looking at the similar scenario here, right? So I think we'll know more about it. I'll tweet things out tomorrow morning. I'll give you guys an update on my oscillator here, right? Bears want to see this thing coming back down, resetting. Bulls want to see this thing getting back up, elevated, so that they can keep pushing and keep that bullish momentum going, right? I'll come for you guys tomorrow, and good luck trading tomorrow.